What's up, everybody? This is Sound Booth Theater Live. These are the cold reads of Jackson. Everybody Loves Large Chests, Volume 9. It's coming up, guys. The end of this series is coming up, and I'm sad. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry like a little bitch about it when it's gone, because I just love the series. It's so much fun, and I know that you guys have so much fun when we produce these. But, you know, it is what it is. Things have to end eventually. Thankfully, Neven wrote so much that it's taken a while to end. I'm fine with that. So yesterday I did about 5% of the book. I'm going to try and reach a little bit further, try and do 3 hours today. And see how far we can get within that time. If you guys don't recall, we basically were introduced to this new character Opia, who's this stoner druid elf lady, and she loves hallucinogens, and she's a monster tamer, and so she had this hydra, and she was riding this motherfucker in the jungle. She found this blight that she had been quested to get rid of, and at first she was having a good time killing zombies with her damn hydra, and then another hydra showed up that was undead, that was much bigger, and chased her down, and we all thought she was gonna die. And then Jen, aka Zone, jumps to her rescue. We thought she was fucking dead. We thought this, but nope. She's back at it. She whooped the undead hydra's ass. They made a little. She and the stoner elf made a little deal, and then Jen saw the Dracolich from Book 8 up in the sky and went after her. So I don't know if this is the first time we've seen Zone use her wings or not. I can't remember if she used them in the previous battles. But this is going to be pretty cool. We stopped in the middle of this part of the chapter, which is not something I like to do for cold reads, but I was running out of time. But yeah, that's exactly where we're going to pick up. Jen was up there in the sky with the Dracolich, and let's see what she does to it. Before I get started, I'm going to go get some water. I'm going to get something to clean my lenses, my glasses. But I also want to remind everybody, go to soundbooththeater.com, pick up The Stars Have Eyes by Neven Iliev. It is his second serial from Royal Road that finally made it to audio. And we spent a good year making the audio for it, episode by episode, month by month. It was such a blast, and if you guys like Everybody Loves Large Chests, you're going to look at it and go, I don't know, it's a romantic comedy. There's probably not a whole lot of, like, demons raping things and ultra-violence, and that's true. There's not a whole lot of that in The Stars Have Eyes. It probably zero demon rape, but there is just a tiny bit of violence at the very beginning. But after that, it's quite tame as far as violence is concerned, but it's wonderful. It's wholesome, it's human, it's interesting, but it still has that same feel for the humor, the very, very English humor that Neven likes to employ. So go check out that first episode. It's free. If you don't like it, you can toss it away. But I guarantee you, if you listen to it, you're going to like it, and you'll buy the rest of the episode. So do not delay. Go check out Stars Have Eyes now. I'll be right back. Oh, of course, and also a brand new short story just released today under our Portal Side Quests anthology. It is called The Pilgrimage by Kyle Kieran. If you don't recognize that name, that is the guy who wrote the Ripple System series that's on Audible right now, narrated by Travis Baldry. And so, yeah, go pick that up as well for free. The entire anthology is free currently, so go check it out, guys. Alright, just gotta clean my glasses real quick. Sales not bad yesterday. People are eating up Kaiju, man. Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon. I'm so happy. I'm so happy people are buying that now. Well, I just found out I need to post one more place. Sorry, guys. Real quick. Almost done. Alright. And put the cover on. Boom. Alright, cool. Sorry about that, guys. Alright, let's get this going. I have the wrong set open. Yay! Sean McGeehan. Yes, of course. Yes, yes, yes. All of your purchases, like the only thing that's changing is the app. There's the interface is changing. There's nothing that's changing about your library or what you can access or anything like that. If you bought stuff, you have it. Oh, Frank Moore just reminded me that I need narration socks, but I've already delayed enough. I'm gonna have to run this one dangerously. However,
her current opponent was as far from angelhood as one could get. It was big, it was slow, and it had an angry spell slinger on its back.
All right, she's in the angelhood. We be up in the angelhood. Let's see. Where is this?
However, her current opponent was as far from angelhood as one could get. It was big, it was slow, and it had an angry...
The only thing I'm hurting are monsters!
Where's that? There we go. There we go. All right.
Lightning bolt!
Nora unleashed a fistful of magical energy at the slippery angel. The monk may have been a fast and agile flyer, but even she wasn't quick enough to dodge an attack that came at her with... The monk may have been a fast and agile flyer. The monk may have been a fast and agile flyer, but even she wasn't quick enough to dodge an attack that came at her at the speed of light. The electrical jolt caught her in the shoulder stump, punching through her defensive layer of ki. Jen's body spasmed involuntarily, momentarily reducing her flying abilities to that of a brick and allowing the undead dragon's tail to swat her out of the sky. Let's try that again. Jen's body spasmed involuntarily, momentarily reducing her flying abilities to that of a brick and allowing the undead dragon's tail to swat her out of the sky. At least, that's what Nora intended. But the monk sprang back to life at the last moment. She intercepted the incoming attack by smashing it between her elbow and knee like a human vice. This broke the offending limb in half, but Jen still got clipped by its razor-sharp spikes and received a sizable gash in her gut. She could do little to prevent that, as her ki had already been depleted, absorbing the... She could do little to prevent that, as her ki had already been depleted, absorbing the majority of that spell's damage. Damaging the tail with pure strength was really just making the best of a bad situation. It was about to get worse, as a monk's ki replaced their MP when it came to using skills while also making it It was about to get worse, as a monk's ki replaced their MP when it came to using skills while also making it impossible to cast spells. So, real quick, let's see. I just realized I should make this a Dracolich action. Music? Oh yeah. I'll go ahead and share my screen as well. No, that's the wrong way. There we go. Let's get rid of the Discord here. Alright, and the action scene is tagged already, so we'll just stretch it out when it's time.
Cast spells. When it came to using skills while also making it impossible to cast spells.
Where is this? Where is it? Ah, there it is. Okay. With Jen's... Excuse me. With Jen's resource running on empty, she could no longer sustain her divine flight. Her halo and golden wings disappeared, and she plummeted towards the ground. Thankfully, even though her pool of energy was rather small in capacity, its recovery rate was exceptional. She managed to get back enough of it to regain her
She managed to get back enough of it to regain her flight long before she hit the ground and used a quick application of the healing hand skill to close her open wound. It wasn't potent enough to fully mend that injury, but it was instant, cheap, required no incantation, and helped keep her blood and guts on the inside. The real problem was dealing with the magic user. She couldn't deflect spells without her adamantite staff, but she had faced... She couldn't deflect spells with her adamantite staff, but she had faced hundreds of robed twinkle fingers. She couldn't deflect spells without her She couldn't deflect spells with her... Excuse me. She couldn't deflect spells without her adamantite staff, but she had faced hundreds of robed twinkle fingers before she got her hands on that art. She couldn't deflect spells without her adamantite staff, but she had faced hundreds of robed twinkle fingers before she got her hands on that artifact.
Lightning bolt!
Performing the seemingly impossible, she dodged the Lich's next attempt to electrocute her by jerking out of the way just as she was finishing her chant. Lightning was instantaneous, but the Lich's aim correction was not. The theory was simple, but one needed considerable agility and exceptional timing to pull it off. Having momentarily avoided the blast, Jen gained a bit of altitude until she was on Nora's level and prepared her next move. She wasn't 100% sure if the technique would work with just one arm, but the angel tried it anyway. Her right hand moved up to her face, her index and middle fingers pressing against her temple.
Solar glare!
The martial art activated despite the handicap, producing a blinding flash of light that poured out of her eyes. The Lich recoiled as her vision went wide. Unfortunately, this move was something of a double-edged sword since it did the same to its user, but Jen didn't need eyes to hit a target that bloody big. Besides, she had already gauged the distance and direction before using the solar glare. So she easily landed a spinning vertical guillotine kick on the bone dragon's skull. Excuse me. The flying abomination had even moved of its own accord to try and bite her in half, but without its creator's guidance, it was no match for the physical incarnation of violent combat that was Jennifer Jackson. Its head was split cleanly in half, much like that zombified. Its head was split cleanly in half, much like that zombified hydra. This wasn't enough to destroy the undead construct, but at least it couldn't use that annoying breath anymore. It still had other appendages to worry about, though. Nora, who had regained her vision far quicker than her human opponent, commanded her minion to rapidly flap its massive wings. The wind it kicked up was so strong that the still blinded monk got swept away and spun around, unable to tell up from down. Oops. The wind it kicked up was so strong that the still blinded monk got swept away and spun around, unable to tell up from down. Again, Scraw says. She was forced to rein in her wings and let gravity claim her while her eyes recovered. Though she regained her sight and orientation a few seconds later, her opponent had put a considerable distance between them. This was bad, as it was unlikely the solar glare would help her close the gap again. The pose one had to take to invoke it was really obvious, and defending against it was as simple as shutting one's eyes. To make matters worse, the massive skull she had shattered was currently being rebuilt at a fervent pace by the undead necromancer. One could argue that Jen should have just aimed at the Lich's head instead of the dragon's. One could argue that Jen should have just aimed at the Lich's head instead of the dragon's, but even she wasn't good enough to land a blind kick that precise. Just as the monk was formulating a new strategy, she caught sight of something small and glittering flying up towards the bone dragon. The transparent, apple-sized object smashed against its underside and broke apart like glass. It instantly coated the monster's ribcage in a layer of bright green acid so potent that it made chunks of eroded bone fall off the dragon like a macabre snowstorm. The damage inflicted may have only been superficial, but the spell's nature and sheer size of the unholy abomination made it so it had a lot of... The damage inflicted may have only been superficial, but the spell's nature and the sheer size of the unholy abomination made it so it had a lot of surface to work with. Alright, we're gonna go back to the jungle here.
Oh ho! Nice one, Spittles.
Back on the ground, far below the actual battle, Opia was enthusiastically patting her pet hydra.
Here, boy, do it again.
She handed the beast another armed spell crystal containing a corrosive splash spell. She handed the beast another armed spell crystal containing a corrosive splash spell. Spittles grabbed it with the jaws of its leftmost head, coiled the flexible muscles on its serpentine neck, and whipped it upwards. The slingshot-like motion launched the solidified lump of magic towards the bone dragon. It burst in the air just before making contact with its left wing, spraying its payload all over the limb. It burst in the air just before making contact with its left wing, spraying its payload all over the limb. It wasn't a direct hit, but that didn't stop the aggressive acid from eating right through the slender bones and sinewy membranes.
What the shit?
The Lich could only let out a surprise curse before her ultimate creation began plummeting towards the ground. Granted, the bone dragon was mostly being kept afloat by the magic of its ghastly flight skill, but it still needed that wing to maintain it. With the limb in tatters, it could only flail about awkwardly as it fell in an uncontrollable spiral. Nora stubbornly clung onto it, as she was sure her undead form could withstand the impact. Being grounded against that monk wasn't great, since it would allow her to close in much easier than in the air, but it wasn't all bad. The Lich still had a number of ground-based undead minions, though her zombified hydra was instantly demolished, and investigating that was why she was out here in the first place. She still had 6 more at her disposal. That wasn't even counting the dozens of other undead at her beck and call. Not quite an army just yet, but close enough. Disoriented by the downward spiral and preoccupied with remotely commanding her undead creations, Nora failed to consider that she might not even reach the ground. Jen flew into the spinning mass of bone and spikes, burying her foot in Nora's midsection before the Lich could react. The force of the impact completely overwhelmed the undead's body, ripping it in two and sending her screaming torso flying away like a dish rag caught in a hurricane. The angel wasn't quite done with her yet, as she swooped in and grabbed the semi-monster by the throat. Jen accelerated downwards towards a random boulder sticking out of the blight-infested ground and, for lack of a better word, buried the Lich in it. The lump of solid stone was smashed to pieces, while the only thing remaining of Nora was a layer of foul-smelling residue on Jen's palm. She glanced towards the not-a-dragon just in time to see it break apart into a pile of shattered bone upon its reunion with the ground. Okay, so there's a part...
What the shit?
Okay, so right here. Flying high in the sky. It's going to replace jungle. And jungle's going to replace again. Pieces, while the only thing remained... Screaming torso flying away, accelerated downwards, buried the Lich in it.
we go.
Residue on Jen's palm.
Yes!
Opia let out a cheer of victory before mounting spittles and rushing over to where the angel landed. The blight had already cleared much of the trees and vegetation in this part of the jungle, so she could easily see the dust cloud her flashy landing had made.
I did not see that, Gary Simmons. I'm sorry. I will check that after this.
So she could easily see the dust cloud her flashy land.
Hey, Jen? You alive in there? Oh, never mind. Hey, Jen? You alive in there? Well, never mind.
Okay, so I think maybe the action scene's over here.
Well, never mind.
The hydra-riding druid looked through the rubble, but almost immediately realized she needn't worry. She could clearly see the monk sitting on a chunk of shattered rock, and, though she was definitely alive, she did not seem well. She was leaning forward with her elbow on her thigh and face in her palm. Though her scratched-up hand and unkempt black hair obscured her expression, the lack of tension in her shoulders and her long, drawn-out breaths painted a picture of someone who had given up.
What's wrong, Jen?
The elf asked.
I didn't splash you with magic, right? Why do you care?
Even the woman's voice was noticeably shakier than her usual monotone.
Why do you care?
Even the woman's voice.
Because we're partners, sort of. And I would like to know if I can count on you to do your part.
It was a dry, emotionless, mocking chuckle Opia couldn't help but interpret as an insult. It was a dry...
So would I.
Jen's next words made it clear the one she was looking down on was none other than herself. That lich should not have been anywhere near as much trouble as she had been. That lich should not have been anywhere near as much trouble as she had been. She was a monk, a natural enemy to the undead, yet she let one of those toss her around so easily. It wasn't due to her lack of high-end equipment or her missing limb. It was because she was unfocused and hot-headed, her judgment clouded by that nagging, thrill-seeking voice at the back of her head. Yet again, it was only in hindsight that she recognized her mistakes. The angel didn't have to confront the lich and her bone dragon directly. The angel didn't have to confront the lich and her bone dragon directly. She could have focused on evasion until she tracked down and purified her phylactery. That was a much wiser strategy that offered a higher chance of victory, yet Jen flung herself face first into danger without a second thought. This self-destructive habit made it extremely difficult to find anyone willing to work with her long-term. The first people that put up with her recklessness were Hilda, Fayhorn, and Lichter. Those were good times. But Jen ultimately had to take her leave whenever her once-wild teammates started to mellow out. They effectively retired to take on mentorship roles while the monk kept carrying on as she always had. This didn't change much even after Edward recruited her. He understood her obsessions and gave her almost exclusively solo assignments so that her bad habits didn't endanger He understood her obsessions and gave her almost exclusively solo assignments so that her bad habits didn't endanger anyone except herself. While Jen knew all that and recognized that this reckless behavior would one day get her killed, she couldn't help but indulge in it.
You realize I was joking, right?
Opia stated.
If anything, I'll be the one dragging you down. It's the first time I've seen someone as strong as you in action, and I know for a fact I can't keep up.
The monk lifted her face out of her hand, threw the elf a blank look, then stared off somewhere beyond the horizon.
I'm not that great. Like fuck you're not. You took a lightning bolt to the face like it was nothing. Then, when the skeleton dragon, and I repeat, the skeleton fucking dragon, tried to smack you with its tail, you snapped it off like a twig. Do you know...
Bah, my accent's going all over the place, but it doesn't matter. This isn't my part.
Do you know how amazing that was? I could never do that. Not even in my wildest dreams. And trust me, they get crazy.
I actually should probably stick with the Cockney for this one. Not Cockney, but more like modern English.
Hearing that deluge of excitement pour out of this stranger caused Jen's cheeks to blush a little in embarrassment. It had been a long time since someone had acknowledged her. So bluntly and openly.
Then you broke the dragon's skull like it was made out of paper, Opia continued. All with one hand tied... Well, with one hand. If I didn't know any better, I'd think I was tripping balls on this guy's spit. Shit, maybe I am. Snek, that all happened, right?
Okay, so... what's up, Lazy? Thanks for coming. I talked to Neven a little bit yesterday about Snek's voice. He suggested something more goblin-y. So let me try that. Where did I put his voice before? Was it under Monster?
Proceeded to stomp it flat under its webbed front feet.
No, that wasn't it. Was it dude one?
Snek. Snek, Snek. Snek, Snek, Snek. Snek.
Snek. Snek. Snek. Snek. Snek.
The house mimic nodded sagely.
Snek, Snek. Snek, Snek. Snek, Snek. Snek, Snek.
See? Even Snek's impressed. Let me tell you, that's not easy with how much shit this smartass has lived through. Honestly, I only butted in because I couldn't sit still after watching you zoom all over the place. I can't wait to see what sort of ridiculous things you'll do once we get you that new arm. New arm? New arm? Well, yeah. You obviously don't want to remain a cripple, and I know a guy who can help you out with that. You can get a rejuvenation potion? No. Do I look like the sort of girl that can pull diamonds out of her ass? No, wait. No, wait, don't answer that.
The elf's hype had died down somewhat, so she continued in a calmer, more professional tone.
I'm talking about limb root seeds. We plant one of those in your shoulder, let it drink up your blood and nutrients, and you'll have a brand new arm in less than a week. You can move it around just like the real thing, even use skills and arts with it. Granted, it will be made of vines and bark, is technically a parasite, and Now that I think about it, might just explode if you put too much key into it, but it's better than nothing.
Jen hadn't really considered that. True, a rejuvenation potion...
No way.
More professional tone. True, a rejuvenation potion would be the best solution to her short-handedness, but it wasn't the only option. Even a temporary arm was better than no arm, as it would allow her to Even a temporary arm was better than no arm, as it would allow her to once more wield her weapon of choice. While her hand-to-hand techniques were pretty strong, staves were her specialty. Having one would have been a huge help against that lich, even if it wasn't the magic deflecting. Having one would have been a huge help against that lich, even if it wasn't the... Having one would have been a huge help against that lich, even if it wasn't the magic-deflecting adamantite rod she lost in Watford. Reinvigorated by Opia's words of praise and wisdom, Jen stopped sulking and rose to her feet.
Requesting aid with finding the phylactery before the lich reconstitutes herself. That was a lich? Damn. No wonder the blight's so strong around here. Come to think of it, don't you monks have absurdly high resistances to diseases and poisons? Affirmative. Nice. Then I can just run wild and not worry about you getting caught up in my desolation magic while you do your thing. Reporting that This is going to be the best team-up ever! Let's go, Spittles. We have a whatchamacallit to find. There's got to be a bounty or something for it. I can already taste the profits. Mwah!
Resistance does not mean immunity, were the words that Jen had failed to get out before the freshly excited druid rode her pet hydra off in a random direction while cackling ominously. The angelic monk was already having second thoughts about this arrangement. But in the end she followed after Opia. Even if the partnership was unlikely to last long, she was going to make the most of it. Truthfully, she wouldn't mind a bit of friendly fire every now and then if it meant she got to play with spittles. Besides, after witnessing a certain murderous chest's explosive growth, she couldn't help but wonder if that little hydra might one day become strong enough to challenge her. Crash!
How the shit did you trip? You have 3 damned heads to watch your step.
Okay, maybe not. All right. That's the end of Chapter 1, Part 1. I wonder if we're going to get back to Boxy in this next part. What's up, Aaron Collier? Thanks for coming. I think Sarah did have a diamond in her ass at some point. Yep, okay. Back to Boxy. Wow. Now, wait a second. This doesn't say part 2. Huh. There's no parts here in this book. A Tale of Birthdays. A Tale of Birthdays. Kira and Rowana were out on a stroll. The lovebirds walked side by side, the elf hugging her girlfriend around the shoulder while the beastkin's arm wrapped around the other's waist. The redhead happily nestled her head into the taller woman's collar while slowly stroking her hip over the long winter coat. The intimate display made it clear their relationship was a lot more involved than... The intimate display made it clear their relationship was a lot more involved than really close friends. This openness also attracted a lot of attention from bystanders. However, they weren't looks of disgust or hate that Rowana might have expected a year ago. While there were definitely a lot of people that felt strongly against same-sex couples, they were ultimately a minority. They didn't dare speak out against Azurvale's beloved hero of chaos after all she did during the war. They didn't dare speak out against Azurvale's beloved hero of chaos after all she did during the war. Not publicly, at least. Fans could be rather zealous when provoked, and Kira had enough to make her own legion. The spunky redhead's explosive popularity was why the couple was garnering so much attention. The lovebirds didn't seem to mind or even notice all those stares and murmurs. Over the months, they'd gotten quite used to this sort of treatment whenever they went out in public. That said, there was a new, growing trend amongst Azurvale's markets and merchants the couple hadn't quite adapted to yet. A peddler they passed by was offering an array of colorful rag dolls that bore remarkable and intentional resemblance to Kira. He wasn't the first to do this, nor would he be the last. Quite a few entrepreneurs were trying to capitalize on the redhead's popularity by selling toys and artwork bearing her likeness. This merchandising movement started around Aurora Eve and had been gaining traction since. This particular seller was rather savvy, as he noticed Kira and Rowana looking in his direction and immediately took advantage of the situation. This particular seller was rather savvy, as he noticed Kira and Rowana looking in his direction and immediately took advantage of the situation. Turn off the Snek effect.
Oh my!
The man yelled loudly.
If it isn't the brave hero and her lovely companion! Oh my! If it isn't the brave hero and her lovely companion! Come, let me thank you for your service to this... Come, let me thank you for your service to the people of this city.
The couple got reeled in by his enthusiasm and wound up with a pair of complimentary Kira dolls before either knew what was happening. The real redhead clearly wasn't comfortable with having a small, cutesy version of herself, though Rowana looked positively ecstatic. She merrily poked the doll's squishy cheek as they walked away from the stall. Kira silently shook her head and rolled her eyes, then briefly threw her gaze over her shoulder. Much as the crafty merchant intended, quite a few people had flocked to his stall, drawn in by that display. Seeing that gave the monster behind the cat girl's lovely features an idea. Seeing that gave the monster behind the cat girl's lovely features an idea. Boxy hadn't given this trend much consideration before, but it realized it might be worthwhile to do something about it. Not to stop it, of course. This fad helped grow and maintain the popularity of its public persona, but it could prove beneficial in other ways. The monster just had to determine if it was worthwhile to kindly inform that merchant and those like him that the use of Kira's likeness was subject to boxing tax.
All right. Let's switch some stuff around.
What's wrong, sweetie?
Rowana asked.
Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong? Then why is your calculating look on? My what? The face you make whenever you count coins in your head. I don't have a face like that. Oh, you absolutely do. You furrow your brows, bite your lip, and your eyes focus on a random point. Huh. I had no idea.
It would appear that the elf was a lot sharper than Boxy gave her credit for. Then again, it was only natural she would be able to read Kira's expressions after all this time together. They'd been practically inseparable the past few weeks in particular, as the shapeshifter had less and less reason for its catgirl persona to run off somewhere. With Edward gone and the Foundation pacified, Boxy had no major threats looming over it for the first time since its mimic days. Dope. With Edward gone and the Foundation pacified, Boxy had no major threats looming over it for the first time since its mimic days. It still had a few loose ends here and there, but they weren't urgent. The shapeshifter had allowed itself to take a much-needed vacation. Actually, it was more of a staycation, since it remained home where it could relax, enjoy its collection of shiny things, and generally laze about. Boxy would go off searching for new taste and shine sensations eventually. But it was content taking things slow for the moment. It truly was amazing how soundly it slept now that it no longer had to worry about the Spy Master's shadow looming over it. The only real concerns the monster presently had were two loose ends. The first was Zone, Edward's secretary and chief enforcer. While a point-blank demonate left nothing of her aside from the charred bones of her left arm, Boxy had a feeling that the monk survived the blast and was currently in hiding. This was a potential liability since she was the only person outside the shapeshifter's inner circle that knew the truth of the Hero of Chaos. However, there was nothing she could realistically do with that information since Kira's personality was so firmly entrenched. Nobody would believe Zone, even if she wasn't a fugitive and wanted war criminal. She might cause a bit of trouble if she publicly attacked Boxy, but the odds were astronomically low. The monk stood no chance of actually defeating the shapeshifter without Gilded Hand support, and she surely knew that. Though she didn't seem all that bright, Zone wasn't the sort of idiot who'd throw her life away on a revenge mission. People that suicidally stupid didn't make it to level 100. The other dangling thread on Boxy's shit list was a bit more of a pressing issue. Nora Cromwell was still at large somewhere on Velos, far to the south. The necromancer-turned-lich was still on the hit list the shapeshifter received from Mortimer. The monster had to hunt down her... The necromancer-turned-lich was still on the hit list the shapeshifter received from Mortimer. The monster had to hunt her down in order to complete the God of Death's quest, but it had a whole year to do so. It wouldn't be that hard either. The eyes of the dead god would lead it to Nora without fail. The eyes of the dead god would lead it to Nora without fail, and Boxy doubted it would struggle to eliminate her once it caught up. The only problem was the several weeks of travel time involved in reaching the opposite end of the known world. Fuck. The only problem was the several weeks of travel time involved in reaching the opposite end of the world. No, known world. The only problem was the several weeks of travel time involved in reaching the opposite end of the known world and back again. The shapeshifter put off undertaking that journey until later in the year, and not just because it was feeling lazy at the moment. Boxy wanted to make the most of the trip across the shimmering ocean, so ideally it would find some other opportunities to take advantage of whenever it went over there. The shapeshifter was, of course, unaware that one of its leftover problems would resolve the other in a few weeks. The shapeshifter was, of course, unaware that one of its leftover problems would resolve the other in a few weeks, nor would that future revelation change anything, other than fill it with relief that staying home and goofing off turned out to be the right call. Boxy would be able to put the time it saved by not going to Velos towards resolving other matters. Well, eventually. The other items on its to-do list were so inconsequential that calling them chores would be an overstatement. There was absolutely no rush, deadline, or looming threat involved in any of it. Nothing to stress the monster out or drive it to take stupid risks for quick gains. Not even maintaining its public identity was a concern. All the work and practice Boxy put in during its first year in Azure Vale had made it so staying in character as Kira was essentially effortless. It was practically a game at this point.
Kira the placemat! Kira the lunchbox! Kira the flamethrower! Merchandising.
I'll leave my headphones off for a little bit. At this point. It was practically a game at this point.
So, what were you thinking about?
That said, it still had to actually play the part, so it turned its attention back to the elf.
Nothing much.
Kira shrugged.
Just wondering how much longer I can afford to slack off. Oh? Is the call for adventure pulling you away already? More like the need to put food on the table and clothes on my back. No offense, but your apothecary salary is just barely enough to cover both our living costs, and I'd rather not be a freeloader.
I mean, didn't she just bring back a bunch of treasure, though? Officially speaking, the couple were not in the best financial situation. Rowana wanted to be self-sufficient and independent, so they couldn't ask the Slythe family for handouts. Kira had also spent a good deal of money preparing for her made-up trip that was actually Boxy's mission to eliminate the Gilded Hand. The Catgirl had declared said adventure nothing but a waste of time and effort that depleted much of the Redhead's earnings from her previous excursion into the kingdom.
Shouldn't be a problem to get some decent work after the winter passes, though, she added. Technically, it's already passed, Rowana said casually. Weather may not look like it, but it's officially springtime according to the calendar. The snow should begin to clear up in another fortnight or so. I'm looking forward to it. I heard spring in Azure Vale is beautiful. It absolutely is. My favorite time of the year, hands down. Though, wait a minute. Kira, isn't your birthday coming up? Oh, I guess it is now that you mention it. What's with that casual tone? Shouldn't you be more excited? I don't think it's anything worth fussing over.
These were Boxy's true feelings. It knew people celebrated the occasion, but it never saw a reason to care. As far as it was concerned, it was just As far as it was concerned, it was just another day of the year on which enlightened society artificially placed importance. The calendar was filled with holidays that seemed pointless from the monster's pragmatic perspective, even Aurora Eve. Yes, the sky was super shiny for a bit, but one didn't need fancy clothes or elaborate parties to enjoy it. The only other celebration that caught its interest was an event called Tender Hearts Week, which was supposed to take place around the middle of spring. Though it sounded delicious, the monster had a hunch it would be just as asinine as the rest. The birthday thing would likely be no different.
Of course it's worth fussing over.
However, Boxy would still have to participate, since Rowana clearly didn't share Kira's opinion.
It's the day you were born. What could be more important than that? Not just to you, but to me. All right. If you want to get all excited about it, then don't hold back on my account. Hold back? Sweetie, I'm going all out.
The elf flexed her noodle-like arms.
Now, when is it? You said it was near the start of the season, but I don't think I ever got the exact date from you. Oh, right. It's on the 13th. This month? Yep.
This date wasn't randomly chosen. It was the actual day the Lidigar dungeon complex spawned the creature that would later be named Boxy T. Morningwood. Well, probably. The monster had no way of knowing for sure, but it had noticed that the age on its status updated every month on the 13th. It saw no reason to lie about something so trivial, hence why Kira's fictional birth date matched its own. For that matter, who decided that age had to be tracked at all? What meaning did it even serve when a creature not even a year old had seen and caused more crazy shit than most adventurers did throughout their lifetime? Even Boxy recognized it as a ridiculous pace of events, hence why it was eager to try taking things nice and easy for a while. That clearly wasn't going to happen, given how worked up Rowana was getting.
That's in 4 days,
the elf squealed.
You should have told me earlier. I won't have nearly enough time to pick out a present. Present? Maybe some clothes or jewelry? You do like fancy gems. But our living expenses... Oh, I know. Wait, no, the season's not right for that. Maybe something homemade? Rowie? Yes, sweetie? What present? The one for your birthday, of course. I get presents on my birthday? Like, for free?
Like, for free.
Of course you do. You've had birthday parties before, right? I haven't, actually. What? Why not? I didn't have a lot of opportunity to celebrate as a kid. And when yours came around last year, I was still on the front. Oh, Kira, I'm so sorry.
The elf stopped and gave her girlfriend a tender hug. How could she forget all that Kira had been through? She had spent most of her childhood as a destitute orphan living on the streets, so of course she wouldn't have celebrated. She also had the profound misfortune of getting dragged into that pointless war. Rowana was so worried about the redhead that she didn't even celebrate that year, nor did she even think to mention it. Kira's safe return was the only gift she could have asked for.
It's all right, Rowie. You don't need to feel upset. Nonsense. This injustice must be set right. Don't you worry. I'll give you a birthday party that will make up for all those lost years. I'll be back later. I have some serious prepping to do.
The elf practically jogged down the street, leaving Kira behind with a rather confused look on her face. That expression turned to one of unrestrained glee the instant Rowana was out of sight, then vanished just as quickly. That was close. Boxy almost forgot it was in public. It just couldn't help but let its greedy nature bubble up. Birthdays equaled free stuff? If the monster knew this, it would have given Kira one much, much sooner. If the monster knew this, it would have given Kira one much, much sooner. Obviously, it still had a lot to learn about holidays and celebrations, both in elven culture and civilized society as a whole. If such events could be exploited for its own gains, then perhaps it was time to do some serious research into all the gift-getting opportunities the calendar year offered. Its enthusiasm would diminish significantly once it realized that gift-giving was also involved, but it presently had other matters to deal with.
Boss?
What is it, Arms?
I think your weird vegetable is hatching.
Are you talking about the allrana sprout?
Yeah, that.
Already? I thought it wasn't due for another 3 weeks.
Well, it's all pulsating and changing colors and stuff, so I think it's happening right now.
What about Snek? Is she with you?
Yeah, but she's, taking a breather. We got a bit too enthusiastic watering the thing. I don't think you'll be getting a reply from her anytime soon.
All right, I'm on my way. The timing was rather convenient, since Rowana just ran off, so Boxy was free to disappear into an alleyway and make her way over to the Dryad's domain. The shapeshifter slipped into the sewer system, entered the dungeon from below, and adopted a more spider-chested form. Once able...
Spider-chested form. It's in the... someone asked, when is Small Chests Are Fine 2 going to be recorded? It's in process right now. Dory is recording it, so...
Presents? Like, for free?
Once able... Once able... Once able, it used Nexus access to arrive at the little garden it had set up near the dungeon core.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get some ambience going here. We'll need there, nice day in the city. That's how I'll label it. And we'll stop it here.
Once able, it used Nexus access to arrive at the little garden it had set up near the dungeon core.
All right. Let's do a little teleport sound effect here. And dungeon core, Triad domain, dungeon core.
Dungeon core. Then again, garden might have been too strong a word for it. In reality, it was just a circular planter with a diameter of about 3 meters that held a single, strange plant. It looked like a column of overlapping green leaves, sort of like a tall cabbage. It was barely a meter tall and about 40 centimeters wide when Boxy last saw it earlier this morning, but its height and width had doubled since. Its coloration was gradually turning purple from the ground up, and the entire thing was shaking slightly, so Cora's assessment that it was about to hatch was understandable. Okay, let's see. Actually, this one. There we go.
Yo, boss!
The Archfiend waved at Boxy.
That was fast. How'd you lose the bint?
Not important. How long has the sprout been like that?
I don't know. Like 5 minutes? 10 tops.
Boxy quietly studied the plant as it shook and rustled. It sensed something humanoid-shaped moving around inside, so there was no doubt the mountain allrana... It sensed something humanoid-shaped moving around inside, so there was no doubt the mountain allrana was about to pop out. However, the monster seemed to be struggling to escape its leafy shell. Its movements gradually grew slower and weaker, almost like it was getting tired. It probably needed a bit of boost to bust out, and Boxy had a pretty good idea how to give it one. The shapeshifter turned its attention to Zira, whose present state was best described as a wet mess. She was nearby on the dungeon floor, panting heavily and erratically as her naked, sweaty body twitched and spasmed. Come to think of it, it had been several hours since Boxy had departed its lair and left the two demons to tend to the plant. They'd been at it for that long. If they'd been at it for that long, it was no surprise Zira was in the... If they'd been at it for that long, it was no surprise Zira was in this sorry state. Cora had the stamina and perseverance to keep going for actual days, and the djinn was hardly a match for her endurance. Unfortunately, the blue-skinned tramp still had work to do, so she would not be getting any rest just yet. Boxy told Cora to stand back while it picked Zira off the floor via a quartet of tentacles. It stretched its spider legs, lifting its chestacular... It stretched its spider legs, lifting its chestacular body off the ground. It stretched its spider legs, lifting its chestacular body off the ground until it was as tall as the sprout, then held the delirious demon squarely above it. The tricky thing about raising a mountain allrana was that it needed more than nutrients and water to make it grow and blossom. If it was to develop into a splendidly succulent specimen, the sprout needed to be infused with copious amounts of a succubus's demonic essence. Granted, this one was technically a djinn, but her origins made her an adequate donor. That was why Zira had been tasked with looking after the plant whenever possible, and it was why she was strung up above it right now. It seemed the unborn allrana needed a bit of extra encouragement to come out, and Boxy would gladly provide. Oh, God. I love how Sarah always comes in, at the worst times. It's my favorite thing. Without further ado, the shapeshifter began expertly violating the ex-succubus with its tentacles. The renewed assault on her senses caused Zira to scream and wail. She had already been more or less fucked silly, so she stood no chance of keeping her wits with Boxy's multi-purpose She had already been more or less fucked silly, so she stood no chance of keeping her wits with Boxy's multi-purpose appendages scrambling her insides. Her voice actually frustrated Cora. The slut screamed plenty whenever the two of them were doing it, but never quite like that. As the djinn's already flooded nether regions were being mercilessly drilled, they began to spill out copious amounts of sticky, transparent fluid. Droplets of the lewd liquid splashed over the towering plant, but rather than bounce off or evaporate into nothingness, they were soaked up as if the pile of leaves was the world's thirstiest sponge. This was because infusing the sprout with demonic essence was just a fancy way of saying feeding it the love juices from a succubus's lower end. Zira was able to handle that task on her own initially, but that proved challenging as the sprout's needs grew along with its size. That was why Cora had to help water the thing, as the demoness was unable to produce the amounts required to satisfy the budding flower. Unfortunately, even the towering rape machine wasn't tall enough to pound Zira while holding her over this thing due to its significantly increased height. So, Boxy stepped in. It didn't have the seemingly limitless stamina of an archfiend, but it more than made up for it in skill. It knew all of Zira's sweet spots, so it had no difficulty turning her into a perverted sprinkler. The allrana sprout seemed to like the tiny waterfall of lewd juices quite a bit, as it once again grew lively. Its leaves began turning purple in earnest and rustled intensely. This carried on for another minute or so, until the sprout had completely abandoned its former green hue. At that point, it suddenly burst open, its large leaves spreading out in every direction. The rapid expansion prompted Boxy to take a few steps back while it prompted Boxy to take a few steps back while it idly tossed its depraved watering can in some random direction. An incredibly sweet aroma filled the air. It was so appetizing that the shapeshifter instinctively began drooling, though it kept its composure. The smell's source was the small pool of nectar residing in the middle of the allrana flower now in full bloom. Standing in said pot of honey was the creature herself. The mountain allrana had all of the traits one would expect of a succubus-infused creature. Her breasts were clearly bigger than her head, and her thighs, hips, and butt did not lose out in girth. It was honestly a miracle her tiny waist didn't snap immediately with such excessive features. Her human-like skin had a creamy hue, its surface silky smooth, and the tiniest bit oiled up. Oddly enough, she was only mostly naked, as pinkish petals decorated her wrists, shoulders, and legs while covering the knotty bits between her legs and on her chest. Even more ran down her scalp like short hair, with a single flower atop her head. The massive blossom at her feet rapidly lightened in coloration from the rich purple it was supposed to be to a shade adjacent to the rest of her pink petals. The massive blossom at her feet rapidly lightened in coloration from the rich purple it was supposed to be to a shade adjacent to the rest of her pink petals. Zira was likely to blame for this deviance in coloration, though that was unlikely to be an issue. It also wasn't the only influence the depraved demon had on the developing plant. The allrana had a beautiful face and pointed ears that, for lack of better terms, were clearly inherited from her mother. The newly born monster blinked rapidly as her eyes adjusted to the world's brightness. She gazed up at the glowing dungeon core with a thoroughly dumbfounded expression. Her confused instincts were unable to determine if that shiny yellow ball was the sun or not, so she quickly ceased pondering that conundrum and looked around. Her eyesight passed over Boxy and Zira, immediately centering on Cora, or more specifically, the twin rods that were standing at full attention. She smiled coyly and beckoned the fiend over with a wink and a come-hither hand motion, while her other hand slowly peeled back the petals covering her crotch. Her attempts at seduction were rather amateurish, since she was barely a few minutes old, but her ridiculously proportioned body was more than enticing enough on its own.
"Bob, damn!" Cora exclaimed. "Would you look at those jugs? I expected her to be a mega slut, but this is something else. Don't even think about it." "What?" "Come on, boss. Look at her pleading face. She's practically dying to be penetrated. She's a level 1 with only 30 HP. You so much as lay a finger on her and she would actually die. In any event, I don't need you right now, so off you go."
Cora and Zira were both forcibly kicked across the dimensional border. The allrana was visibly saddened to see her first potential victim disappear into thin air. She was abruptly startled when a howling bellow of "Ambrosia!" came out of the wooden chest next to her, only to be surprised once more when a dryad manifested in front of her. Came out of the wooden chest next to her, only to be surprised once more when a dryad manifested in front of her.
Thou called? Oh my lord, why didn't thou tell me this exotic flower was about to bloom?
Sorry, it kind of caught me by surprise, too. She's a bit premature, but looks quite, well developed.
Indeed, she's even larger and more vibrantly colored than the one I encountered during our excursion into that dreadful ice palace. Thank thee so much, my lord.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm going to take this role or not. We'll see.
Beloved?
The confused flower girl dumbly tried to mimic Ambrosia's last word.
Oh!
The dryad squealed while cupping her cheeks.
She is most adorable. My lord, would thou mind if I kept her?
Not at all. She's only here because you asked for one, so feel free to do with her as you see fit.
Verily? Then I shan't hold back.
The dryad skipped closer to the allrana, inspecting her from every angle while the newborn just sort of stood there. She displayed a surprising lack of hostility even though she was operating mostly on instinct. No, it was more accurate to say those instincts were why she was so docile. No, it was more accurate to say those instincts were why she was so docile. They informed her these two strange creatures were monsters on a level completely incomprehensible to her tiny mind. Like an ant facing a tornado, they were so far beyond her that overwhelming awe was the only response she could muster.
Oh, I am not even sure where to start, Ambrosia squealed. Should I teach her to read and write? No. Surely speaking must come first. I wonder if she'll be good with numbers. And a name, of course. I simply must give her one. Zia, perhaps? Or Astra? No, Lavender. Yes, Lavender is perfect.
It would seem the dryad's own instincts were also firing on all synapses. The difference was that hers were of the maternal variety, while the allrana's were for survival. Boxy was also preoccupied with some urges, though they mostly revolved around the whole reason it went through the trouble of getting that dumb flower. If you're wondering what to do, then why not start with the cross-pollination you were telling me about? It was quite eager to find out how delicious this new and improved dryad nectar would be, so it bluntly nudged the dryad to stop beating about the bush and get on with it.
An excellent suggestion, my lord. It will be a perfect way to get ourselves acquainted.
Ambrosia stepped onto the allrana's petals, causing the flower girl to pull away slightly. She didn't seem afraid or angry, just bewildered. She didn't struggle or resist as the dryad embraced her from the front. Their collective breast-shaped plant flesh pressed together. Their collective breast-shaped plant flesh pressed together as Ambrosia planted a deep kiss on her fellow sentient vegetable. Their collective breast-shaped plant flesh pressed together as Ambrosia planted a deep kiss on her fellow sentient vegetable. The allrana's confusion deepened further, but it wasn't long before she began to melt under the more experienced woman's touch. The cross-pollination intensified shortly afterwards as Ambrosia touched, sniffed, and tasted every part of the delicate flower maiden. It was the plant kingdom's equivalent of mating, and both parties had extremely well-endowed female forms, so the resulting spectacle was undoubtedly lewd. Boxy was entirely unmoved, of course. It simply sat there and quietly watched the action unfold like a baker waiting for bread to rise. Regardless, the fact that the shapeshifter was witness to the cross-pollination meant that the Beyond could see it too. Lewd content was hardly anything new on the Boxy show, but this was the first time in history that a dryad and an allrana were going at it. The audience was loving the front row seats. Cora saw it too, but only felt frustrated. Being denied access to that unsullied honeypot was one thing, but watching someone else partake in it was giving her a serious and figurative case of blue balls. Deciding she'd better distract herself, and since she was in the beyond for the first time in a while, the fiend proceeded to check her unread D-mail messages. As luck would have it, she quickly found just what she was hoping for. From The Truth Is Out There at ether.gd to XXX Pussy Destroyer 69 XXX at beyond.general. Damn it. XXX Pussy Destroyer 69 XXX at beyond.general. Subject: Come see me. I think 3, yeah.
Corlentaprix, come visit as soon as you have a few hours. I really need to see you. It's urgent. Sincerely, Teresa, Goddess of Truth and Justice, Patron Deity of Humanity.
It would appear her high and mightiness was in need of another pipe cleaning, a really thorough one by the sound of it. Needless to say, the frustrated archfiend was more than happy to oblige. She got in touch with Carl and, after going through some special channels and back doors, materialized in Teresa's divine space, already raring to go through the... She got in touch with Carl and, after going through some special channels and back doors, materialized in Teresa's divine space, already raring to go through the goddess's own back door.
Ah, you are finally here. Ah, you're finally here.
The curly-haired blonde said, turning to meet her visitor.
Took you long enough.
However, while naked, Teresa was far less amorous than Cora was expecting. There was also something else off about her.
Hey, Hammer Tits. What's with the bloated belly? Trying out a new look? No, I'm pregnant. With triplets. Your triplets.
Gonna have to try better than that, Blondie. I may not be the sharpest glove in the bread bin, but I'm not falling for that one.
Hello, Cora. Goddess of Truth and Justice here. Got a message for you from reality. It wants you to stop ignoring it.
Holy shit, you're serious.
Dead serious.
What? But this is like... Huh? The flabbergasted fiend grew increasingly incoherent. There were so many things she didn't know, and yet more things she didn't know she didn't know. Her face changed expression every other second as her less than agile mind tried its best to parse the implications of what she had just heard. Her many hands assumed one position after the next. As if playing out her chaotic internal debate. It was the first time she'd had to seriously worry about things that went way above her head, and she clearly had no idea how to deal with this development. Teresa silently watched and, despite the gravity of the situation, couldn't help but smile as the fiend flailed around both mentally and physically. Though Cora was unquestionably evil and violent, there was something pure and honest about her that the goddess found endearing despite her better judgment. Maybe humanity's collective notion that good girls like bad boys was to blame, though the origin of the infatuation didn't matter. The important thing was that Teresa's feelings were both real and fruitful. So the goddess patiently waited for her partner to wrestle with the crater-sized truth bomb. So the goddess patiently waited for her partner to wrestle with the crater-sized truth bomb. After a few minutes, Cora seemed to reach some sort of conclusion as her shoulders dropped with a heavy sigh. The goddess accurately deduced that the fiend had simply given up on trying to make sense of the situation.
I'm certain you have many questions, Teresa spoke. Ask them, and I will do my best to answer.
Cora straightened up a bit, did a triple shrug, and said the last thing Teresa expected to hear.
So, can I still fuck you in the ass or what?
Let me try that again. I think more sincere confusion.
So, can I still fuck you in the ass or what?
There we go. All right, what time is it?
Come visit as soon as you have a few hours. I really need to see you. It's urgent. Excellent suggestion, my lord. It will be a perfect way to get ourselves acquainted.
Ambrosia stepped onto the allrana's petals, causing the flower girl to pull away slightly. She didn't seem afraid or angry, just bewildered. She didn't struggle or... A tale of blood money. Spring was in full swing around Azurevale. It was the most beautiful time of year, as the hilt trees were in their full bloom. It was the most It was the most beautiful time of the year, as the hilt trees were in their full bloom. The predominantly green canopy that loomed over the elven capital was dotted by countless blight. The predominantly green canopy that loomed over the elven capital was dotted by countless light blue flowers of varying sizes and shapes. Colorful azure petals drifted lazily on the wind, giving the city a mysterious atmosphere not seen anywhere else in the world. Granted, that wasn't entirely a good thing. Though beautiful enough to be the city's namesake, this weather played havoc on people living on solid ground. Some days, the loose flowers piled up so high that they were almost like snow, only with less melting and more rotting. Thus, the alchemists enjoyed a boom in business, mostly in the form of allergy medicine and specialized herbicides. The loose petals also had some minor applications of their own, primarily as pigments for paints and novelty food coloring. All in all, it would have been a perfectly standard spring if not for one oddity among the... All in all, it would have been a perfectly standard spring if not for one oddity among the 12 great hilts. All in all, it would have been a perfectly standard spring if not for one oddity among the 12 great hilts. The flowers adorning Ambrosia's lush branches had taken on a bright pink coloration, matching the petals of the allrana she secretly cross-pollinated with. The fruits and nectar she produced would turn out especially sweet and fragrant, earning even Boxy's approval. It was therefore decided that Lavender would become a permanent resident of the dungeon as its new dungeon master. That way the Dryad could cross-pollinate with her at her leisure, and the shapeshifter would have someone to manage the place whenever it was out and about. Another benefit was that it once again had a line of communication to Ambrosia through the dungeon core, though the Flower Girl filter was sure to cause a bit of interference. Surprisingly, Azure Vale's citizens were even more delighted by this turn of events. The shower of pink petals got mixed receptions, but the higher quality produce was excellent news. The sudden change wasn't as jarring as one might expect, as hilt blossoms were known to occasionally deviate from the blue hues typical to the species. Considering that the hero of chaos was known to live somewhere on that tree, such a development didn't seem out of place. There were, of course, purists and traditionalists that hated the change in color, but they still had 11 other trees to satisfy their tastes. The pink exception, on the other hand, thrilled those that had grown bored of the same blue shower. The rosy petals were especially popular with the youngsters as they set the mood for the romantic Throbbing Hearts celebration. All things considered, almost everyone in Azure Vale had something to look forward to this spring season in particular. All things considered, almost everyone in Azure Vale had something to look forward to this spring season in particular. Things weren't as rosy on the other end of the continent. The Sovereign States Alliance, which occupied the southeastern The Sovereign States Alliance, which occupied the southeastern quadrant of Attica's ring-like landmass, was a coalition of 26 city-states. The formerly independent governments presided over a wide range of cultures that often did not get along with each other. They all had their own spring holidays and events, yet those were a point of contention. A particularly sore topic was the upcoming St. Hubert's Day, which commemorated the scholar most often credited with formalizing the alphabet used by the most... A particularly sore topic was the upcoming St. Hubert's Day, which commemorated the scholar most often credited with formalizing the alphabet used by most of the civilized world. There were countless disputes about which city-state the historical figure belonged to, and each contender had their own idea regarding the holiday's exact date. This was quite ironic, considering St. Hubert spent his whole life working towards the unification of all enlightened. Unfortunately, as was their nature, people rarely came together unless faced with an insurmountable foe that gave them no other choice. The Sovereign States Alliance was one such coalition born of necessity. The Sovereign States Alliance was one such coalition born of necessity. The Sovereign States Alliance was one such coalition born of necessity. The many nations that belonged to it could not hope to oppose the military might of the Lodrak Empire to the west. Had they stubbornly remained independent, the superpower would have claimed a much larger portion of the continent's southern half. The alliance's formation allowed them to keep the imperial armies at bay and, in recent decades, even managed to reclaim some territory that had previously lost to the greedy humans. The alliance's formation allowed them to keep the imperial armies at bay and, in recent decades, even managed to reclaim some territory they had previously lost to the greedy humans. Though it was worth noting these conflicts were driven by politics rather than race, the coalition of city-states was one of the most densely populated regions in the world, and a significant number of them were human. Their kind seemed to be everywhere. on Terrania. It was impossible to find a place or culture that didn't have humans in it, however minor their number. The ability to fit in nearly everywhere was one of the things that set humanity apart. They were the most adaptable of the enlightened races, able to survive and thrive in nearly any society or environment. Not to say that the other tribes of Terrania didn't excel in their own ways. Elves were agile and precise. Dwarves boasted superior strength and stamina. Gnomes were quick-witted and ingenious. Giants had indomitable spirits that held up their immense bodies in times of crisis. The Beastkins' sharp senses and sturdy claws made them natural-born hunters and explorers. The raptors of Velos possessed powerful jaws, and their reptilian bodies could strike suddenly and swiftly. The lizard folk were also exceptional swimmers. though they paled in comparison to the fish people known as Crimer. As an amalgamation of so many small nations, the Alliance had become something of a melting pot of races and cultures as citizens traveled freely between its members. Though originally united only by a common enemy, relations between the 26 city-states had gradually improved over the years. The coalition was still plagued by a number of frictions and disputes, such as the aforementioned St. Hubert's Day, but at least they argued over these with words rather than swords. The alliance had held strong for 60 years and, by the look of things, would continue even if the Empire ceased being a threat. Many thought that day would never come, but recent events were steadily making it into a tangible possibility. Many thought that day would never come, but recent events were steadily making it into a tangible possibility. The Inquisition was aggressively cracking down on the greedy and selfish nobles that were chiefly responsible for the nation's warmongering policies. With a bit of luck, it was possible that the entirety of Attica would see long-lasting peace for the first time in 2 centuries, all within a decade.
I like how we can go from like ridiculous, dirty, disgusting bullshit to like interesting macroeconomical, macro-cultural analysis of the different races and countries of Terrania.
Of course, while certainly feasible, that future was only wishful thinking at this point. People were fickle and petty creatures that passed on their grudges to future generations. A prime example was the pair of black sheep within the Alliance. Though formally members of the Coalition, these 2 neighboring territories had closed borders that effectively cut them off from the rest of the world. Their names were Valona and Eteria, and they were the last functional remnants of the once great Adam's theocracy. This civilization once dominated the heart of the continent, but that was ancient history. Their reign came to an abrupt end when the entire nation and most of its people were swallowed up by an immense tectonic upheaval that hadn't been seen before or... Their reign came to an abrupt end when the entire nation and most of its people were swallowed up by an immense tectonic upheaval that hadn't been seen before or, thankfully, since. The cause of the catastrophic event was shrouded in mystery and speculation, but the outcome was not. These days, the only thing the Adams theocracy dominated was the bottom of the Oculus Sea, the eternal maelstrom at its center a grim reminder of the past. Not all of the once massive nation was gone, of course. Its traditions lived on in Valona and Eteria, as did its people. The twin states were inhabited by a reclusive race called the Nosferatu, and they were the most backward civilization in the entire world. Their physical appearance instantly set them apart, as the Nosferatu typically had deathly pale skin, long noses, especially sharp and large canines, short yet pointy ears, mostly bald heads, and red, yellow, or black irises. Many also had deep facial scarring, wrinkled scalps, strange lumps on their backs or arms, bloodshot eyes, and generally crooked facial features. Other races commonly found them ugly and repulsive, even more so than the scale-covered raptors of Velos. Ironically, the lizard folk were so alien to Attica's people that their beauty standards were completely divorced. This was not the case with Nosferatu, who were widely seen as malformed elves. This racial schism went deeper than appearances, as their way of life was also seen as backwards. The first, most glaring difference was that Nosferatu were nocturnal, rising with the sunset and going to sleep with the sunrise. Their cuisine involved ingredients most others would find grotesque, such as giant worm meat or fresh goat's blood. A childhood filled with a certain amount of violence and misery was considered a good thing in their culture, to the point where bullying was tacitly encouraged. They were also the only society whose primary deity of worship, much like the theocracy before them, was Mortimer, the god of death and commerce. They were an exceptionally religious people that openly practiced their grim faith. That was why all of their architecture was decorated with images of skulls, skeletons, gravestones, spikes, and other macabre iconography. That was why all of their architecture was decorated with images of skulls, skeletons, gravestones, spikes, and other macabre iconography. A good example of their religious fervor was the castle-sized temple at the heart of A good example of their religious fervor was the castle-sized temple at the heart of Valona, which bore the ominous yet fitting label of Death's Door. The massive stone structure was painted pitch black, its exterior covered in iron spikes that pointed skyward. The moon's pale light cast long, narrow shadows that slowly crept across the temple grounds, which were filled with moss-covered gargoyle statues and countless dead or dying shrubs. The cathedral had a grand total of 4 wings and 0 windows. Its main hall was a wide, spacious area with bare stone floors, dim lighting, and religious symbols and scripts etched into the walls, giving it a depressing, tomb-like atmosphere. In short, Death's Door was exactly what most people would expect from a grand cathedral dedicated to Mortimer, grim in its finality, yet opulent in its scope. The grand double doors to the blackened temple swung open as a procession of 6 people in 2 columns passed through. The pairs at the front and back wore heavy black robes with mithril skull badges sewn onto the shoulders and right breast. They were definitely Nosferatu, given their sickly thin and ghostly white hands, though the long hoods obscured their faces. The 2 people in the middle were dressed completely different. One wore a dark red vest, white undershirt, black trousers, and had nothing to hide his scar. One wore a dark red vest, white undershirt, black trousers, and had nothing to hide his scarred scalp, crooked-toothed smile, and pointy chin. One wore a dark red vest, white undershirt, black trousers, and had nothing to hide his scarred scalp, crooked-toothed smile, and pointy chin. His cufflink, buttons, and belt buckle all resembled His cufflinks, buttons, and belt buckle all resembled the glimmering pale insignias worn by his robed compatriots, signifying he was in fact part of the same group, even if he didn't share the uniform. The final person in the procession was clearly an outsider. The visitor's presence dominated the room, and not just because of his towering height. He was wrapped in a billowing dark blue cloak, his armored boots clacked heavily against the floor, and his yellow eyes seemed to gleam from the darkness within the face wrap covering his head. He carried himself with confidence and purpose while radiating a palpable aura of dread. Anyone who saw this ominous figure walking towards them would instantly turn around and quicken their pace, or at least give them a wide berth. This did not apply to the Nosferatu escorts, who seemed quite thrilled to have him along. That was a super long intro. Okay. All right, so I think... So they're in a big castle, I guess. Big temple. Chin. His cufflinks buttoned through. The pairs at the front and back. In short, Death's Door was exactly what most people would expect from a grand cathedral dedicated to Mortimer, grim in its finality, yet opulent in its scope. There we go. Grim in its finality. I just said giant, depressing temple for ambience.
May I ask what you think of our magnificent temple, esteemed envoy? May I ask what you think of our magnificent temple, esteemed envoy?
The well-dressed one spoke in a shrill, grating voice that sounded like a bucket of rats trying to imitate an enlightened... The well-dressed one spoke in a shrill, grating voice that sounded like a... The well-dressed one spoke in a shrill, grating voice that sounded like a bucket of rats trying to imitate enlightened speech. It certainly lives up to its name. It certainly lives up to its name, Sandman replied. I've not seen a single statue, carving, or surface that didn't evoke images of death. Even the torches and chandeliers burn with black flames. It's as if this place could eat the sun.
Oh, I thank you for those kind words, esteemed envoy. Oh, I thank you for those kind words, esteemed envoy.
Those were by no means kind words. Boxy liked darkness as much as the next murderous man-eater, but things were at their shiniest when bathed in light. For the last time, stop calling me that. It's weird.
If the esteemed envoy insists, I shall oblige. What should this faithful one call the esteemed envoy, esteemed envoy?
Just Sandman will do.
Ah, how quaint. Right this way, please.
The Nosferatu, who had previously introduced himself as Cardinal Zeke, guided his guest through one of the doorways lining the cathedral's main hall. This part of the building housed the dorms, and it showed actual signs of life as opposed to the previous chamber's barren decor. Some rather questionable art lined the walls. A blood-red carpet covered the black marble Some rather questionable art lined the walls. A blood-red carpet covered the black marble floor, and Some rather questionable art lined the walls. A blood-red carpet covered the black marble floor, and the lit candles bore flames with a standard, non-magical glow. Cardinal Zeke and his entourage guided Boxy through the snake-like halls until they reached some sort of common area or mess hall. Cardinal Zeke and his entourage guided Boxy through the snake-like halls until they reached some sort of common area or mess hall. A total of 36 masked youngsters in stereotypical, form-fitting sneaking suits were lined up in 3 neat rows, already standing at attention. They wordlessly saluted Zeke and Sandman's arrival by... They wordlessly saluted Zeke and Sandman's arrival by slamming their left fist against the right side of their chest before clasping their hands behind their backs. Arrival by slamming their left fist against the right side of their chest before They wordlessly saluted Zeke and Sandman's arrival by slamming their left fist against the right side of their chest before clasping their hands behind their backs. Right side of their chest before clasping their hand. Their chest before clasp.
Greetings, children.
The Cardinal spoke as he stood front and center.
As you've been told, we have a special guest visiting us today. Esteemed envoy, would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh man, I'm gonna love voicing these guys. The pompous Cretan had ignored Boxy's request to drop the pompous title, so the shapeshifter paid him no attention. It strode over to the young boys and girls and stared each and every one of them down with a sharp glare. Their bodies were of a height and build resembling humans in their mid to late teens, though their limbs were slightly longer and their hearts were on the opposite side of their body. The shapeshifter was curious how the flavor of these blood pumps would compare to humans, but it could sample the local delicacies later. Cardinal Zeke forcefully cleared his throat.
Esteemed envoy, may I have a word? May I have a word? May I have a word?
Being so brazenly ignored had obviously injured the Nosferatu's pride. He was something of a local big shot, a member of some religious cult called the Grave Walkers. They were essentially the ruling class of Valona and Eteria. So he could not keep quiet at the visitor's blatant show of disrespect. He then reminded himself that, even if he was an outsider, and a particularly filthy one at that, this person was still an honored guest.
Mr. Sandman?
Yes, Cardinal Zeke, he responded over his shoulder.
Would you permit me to make a suggestion?
Of course. Asking is free.
Since this is a rather important decision, I think it would be best to start things off with a show of ability and skill. These students have been trained since they were toddlers and are eager to demonstrate the fruits of their training.
That would be pointless.
It would.
I'm not looking for a show pony. I'm looking for an assassin, a silent killer who will not be caught dead performing their duties. Frankly speaking, just the thought of them holding a demonstration is an insult to their craft.
Yes, I suppose. Still.
Besides, nearly anyone can learn to stab things to death. I'm looking for alertness and adaptability. An agile mind capable of making snap decisions when faced with unexpected circumstances is far more valuable than a strong sword arm or quick feet.
I agree. There is some wisdom in those words. But how do you expect to adequately test for such a quality?
I already have. You there! Step forward. Boxy pointed to a young girl with the body of a 16-year-old human, if a little on the skinny side. The others threw her surprised glances while she calmly walked forward from the middle of the third row until she was standing right next to the towering visitor in front.
What? That one?
Do you have any objections, Cardinal Zeke? Reasonable ones, that is.
I suppose not. Though the girl's face and attitude are a bit unfortunate, she is no less capable than her peers.
I think you might be selling your disciple a bit short. Come, girl. Tell Zeke whether you noticed something out of place. The masked Nosferatu's bright red eyes danced between the stranger and the Gravewalker's representative until a reassuring nod from Boxy got her to speak up.
There's an intruder in the room.
Her voice was quiet, crisp, and clear, a far cry from the standard, raspy, wheezy tones the shapeshifter had heard from the rest of her people. "Where is this intruder?" the guest pressed.
Right there.
She pointed towards the ceiling's upper right corner, right above the doorway that the congregation had walked through. The robed clergymen and other assassins in training stared intently at the spot, but, try as they might, they couldn't see, hear, or feel anything that would constitute a foreign presence.
Wait, no,
She corrected herself.
it's gone now. But I'm sure something was there just a moment ago.
Why didn't you say anything?
Because I was told to keep my mouth shut unless spoken to.
What if your silence had allowed this intruder to, say, kill Cardinal Zeke? The girl stared at the flabbergasted cultist and grinned widely under her mask.
I fail to see why I should care.
Zeke's face twisted in rage and disgust. He turned away from Sandman to hide his bitter expression, but the monster's MLG had already seen it. It seemed clear he had hurled those exact same words at the girl many times and wasn't exactly thrilled to have them thrown back at him. This brief exchange also hinted that the girl had no respect for authority. But that was hardly a deal-breaker. If anything, it was arguably a good thing considering the unsavory duties she'd have to perform. I see. Boxy nodded. I suppose there's not much point in keeping others in the dark anymore. You can come out now, Claus. A tense atmosphere gripped the room, though nothing seemed to happen. Okay, bad choice of words. Come out now, Claus. Being ordered rather than asked, the Tundra webstalker had no choice but to reveal herself. The ice-clad spider demon dropped her optical camouflage, appearing seemingly out of thin air while dangling upside down from a string of webbing, right above the congregation of trainees. Dozens of surprised glares were on her instantly, followed by hushed gasps and barely audible murmurs. Drea's pale gray cheeks turned several shades darker as she waved awkwardly to her confused audience. I'll be taking this one, then. Your cooperation is appreciated, Cardinal Zeke. I'll return if I need a new one. Sandman picked up the girl he had selected and threw her over his shoulder like a bag of yams. Sandman picked up the girl she had selected and threw her over his shoulder like a bag of yams.
Ah!
Sandman Did we get a name from her? Cade. Okay. Bag of yams. She squirmed and struggled at the unexpected manhandling, but her resistance was summarily ignored as the stranger carried her out of the room. She quickly deduced that she had been pawned off to this guy without her knowledge or approval, so she stopped flailing about and let herself be hauled out of the building and through the streets. Be hauled out of the building and through the streets. If anything, she greatly enjoyed this development given the way she kept smiling under her mask the whole time. She held a deep-rooted hatred for Cardinal Zeke, so seeing him get knocked down a few pegs was quite entertaining. The sight of his confused and enraged face kept her grinning and quietly giggling while she was carried through the streets, and the memory of it would be one of the few she treasured. It wasn't until the stranger had brought her beyond the city's walls that she dared speak up.
Are you going to put me down now?
She warily asked.
That depends. Are you stupid enough to run away or stab me?
I thought about it, though I'm sure I wouldn't survive if I did.
Good answer.
Boxy put the petite girl down and gestured for her to follow it down the road. She did so, though she had to jog lightly to keep up with the towering figure's wide stride.
So, are you going to tell me what's going on?
What? You weren't told?
I'm never told anything. I'm not the most popular Spectre cadet.
What's a spectre?
It's hard to explain to an outsider. I guess they're something like a secret police, mostly investigations, spying, and scouting. No stabbing whatsoever, unless ordered to.
Not even in self-defense?
Nope.
Why not?
Spectres should be unseen, hence the name. If one gets attacked, that means they suck at their job and deserve to get stabbed.
I see.
They walked in silence for a while longer before the girl spoke up again.
So, why am I here?
Ah, yes. I apologize. To summarize, you were just chosen to audition for the position of Hero of Death.
I'm going to go ahead and just... do that, and... She did so, though she had to jog lightly to keep up with the towering figure's wide stride. Okay.
Of Hero of Death. I see.
So, why am I here? What?
You know what a hero is, right?
No, I do. It's just... I thought Mortimer's Reaper chose their replacement, and you're not him.
How would you know that?
Because Zeke would have kissed your ass a lot harder.
Good eye.
Strictly speaking, the man in question knew Boxy was an envoy of Mortimer in need of a youth skilled in subterfuge, but that was the extent of the divine revelation his cult had been sent.
So, does that mean you scammed the cult out of a trainee? Don't get me wrong, I like moonlit walks. Don't get me wrong, I like moonlit walks with strange... Don't get me wrong, I like moonlit Don't get me wrong, I like moonlit walks with creepy strangers as much as the next girl, but I don't want to miss lunch if I can help it.
I did not lie. I may not be the Hero of Death, but I was still given the task of choosing and training the best candidate among your peers. Keep in mind that whether Mortimer actually accepts you is... Keep in mind that whether Mortimer actually accepts you as the next Hero of Death depends entirely on you.
Oh. Okay. Could you give me a bit of reassurance?
The shapeshifter snapped its fingers, and one of Drea's icy blades appeared at the girl's neck so suddenly that... The shapeshifter snapped its fingers, and one of Drea's icy blades appeared at the girl's neck so suddenly that she froze completely, not even daring to breathe.
Reassurance?
The
The only assurance you will get from me is that you will do everything I say, or your head will hit the ground before you realize it is no longer attached to the rest of you. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
That calm, collected tone somewhat surprised Boxy. Judging by the firm expression behind that mask, she understood the gravity of her Judging by the firm expression behind that mask, she understood the gravity of her situation, but did not flinch from it. This was a promising sign.
Good.
Sandman waved his hand, and the webstalker once more vanished into the shadows.
But, if you must know, the previous hero of death came down with a sudden and fatal case of incompetence. His understudy got caught up in it as well. The line of succession is broken, so Mortimer has to start over from scratch and apparently decided to go back to the tradition's roots. Thus, I was hired to come here and pick out the most suitable youngster in the Gravewalker's care.
I see. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, if I remember my history lessons. Still, why you, of all people?
Simply put, it was because Boxy received a quest from Mortimer. It actually got quite a few tasks from the Celestial Undertaker following the first one's completion. The shapeshifter could only speculate who took out its final target and why, but it wasn't about to complain. The purging of necromancers from the Order of the Black Wand was officially settled, and the shapeshifter didn't need to waste time crossing the Southern Ocean. It just wished someone had done the same and offed Edward and his pals in its stead, though it did earn a nice prize for its efforts. The Gilded Hand had gathered a total of 7 low-class dungeon... The Gilded Hand had gathered a total of 7 low-class dungeon cores before they fell from grace, and Boxy had used the confusion and chaos of Waxon's attack to The Gilded Hand had gathered a total of 7 low-class dungeon cores before they fell from grace, and Boxy had used the confusion and chaos of Waxon's attack to claim all of them for itself. Naturally, it had no intention to divulge any of that information to the girl, so it decided to kindly inform her it was none of her damned business.
Because I piss rainbows and shit gold.
Gross. Anyway, if you're going to be my instructor, what's the first lesson?
Depends. Mind telling me who you are and what your deal is?
You don't even know who I am? Did you just pick me at random?
Answer the question.
Fine. My name is Cade, and...
No, it's not.
How did you...
I have a nose for bullshit.
Actually, the monsters pilfered Eyes of the Dead God skill. Actually, the monsters... Actually, the monsters... Damn it. Actually, the monsters pilfered Eyes of the Dead God skill exposed the fallacy. It clearly showed this Nosferata's name as Mira, not Cade. The girl opened her mouth to question that statement, but decided not to argue over trivialities.
Sorry, but I refuse to call myself by the name given to me by my piece of shit parents.
That sounds like French, but oh well.
I much prefer Cade.
Explain.
Well, it's a bit embarrassing, but Cade is my favorite dish. It's this really tasty blood sausage made from... From... It's from...
That is not what I meant, and you know it.
All right. I get it. You can't take a joke, so can you call off the weird ice knife lady?
Boxy waved claws away once more and made a mental note to reassess its approach, since intimidation clearly wasn't very effective. If it was to figure out what sort of motivation worked best, it would need a better grasp on her personality, hints of which would surely be found in her personal history.
I will not ask again. Why do you resent your parents?
Because they abandoned me as an infant.
Cade bitterly stated.
Why?
Probably because of my exceptionally ugly face. That's also why I was ignored by society at large and had to grow up homeless and alone.
That's how you learned to not be seen?
Pretty much. I got the stealth skill before I even knew how to talk properly.
How do you end up as a Spectre trainee?
Turns out emotionally vulnerable orphans make good subjects for indoctrination into a death cult.
Seems like they failed with you.
Yeah. Zeke tried to force his propaganda down my throat, but I didn't buy any of it. That's why he hates me, and vice versa.
Start him walking again.
Yet you did not escape, nor did he kick you out. Yet you did not escape, nor did he kick you out.
He couldn't. He recruited me, so getting rid of me would be admitting his own failure to his peers. As for me, I had 3 big meals a day, clothes on my back, a roof over my head, and an actual education. All that was required of me was that I do my tasks and eventually stalk and maybe assassinate dissidents. That suited me just fine. I killed for less back when I was a kid.
Really? You committed murder as a child?
Yeah, I did. What of it?
She suddenly got defensive.
I am not questioning your morality, but your methods.
Though she looked healthy for her current age, her small and flat frame implied she was heavily malnourished as a child. That checked out with her story, and also made sense why she chose to name herself after a dish. This local specialty called Cade was probably one of the first real meals she got after the grave walkers took her in, and was likely a staple of their diet. That aside, if food and shelter was all she needed to stomach the cult's religious nonsense and grim designs, perhaps she responded better to positive reinforcement than threats of punishment. Boxy had determined that much already, and its question had nothing to do with the matter of how to train the rebellious Nosferatu. It was merely curious how a small, weak, and starving child could claim anyone's life but her own.
Oh,
Cade seemed relieved.
I snuck into a guy's house and sprinkled some poison in his food.
I assume this was personal?
Yeah. Fucker took away my scarf.
What made this scarf important enough to kill him over it?
I needed it to cover up my, situation.
She gestured at her masked face.
People are more willing to talk to me when they can't see how hideous I am. The bastard took that away from me just to be an asshole. I showed him. Prick.
She clearly had no regrets about getting some payback. If anything, she was happy about it. Why wouldn't she be? Revenge aside, that crime also got her imprisoned for murder at a very young age. That was how and why Zeke chose to recruit her into his cult as a trainee assassin, which was what Cade... That was how and why Zeke chose to recruit her into his cult as a trainee... That was how and why Zeke chose to recruit her into his cult as a trainee assassin, which was what gave Cade the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to prove herself worthy of being a hero. Granted, she had little reason to trust this Sandman character, but also knew that the Cardinal... Granted, she had little reason to trust this Sandman character, but also knew that the Cardinal wouldn't have agreed to this unless it was legitimate. He might have if it was an excuse to get rid of the ugly thorn in his... He might have if it was an excuse to get rid of the ugly thorn in his side, but he clearly did not expect her to be chosen.
So, if I am understanding things correctly, you turned out like this because of your face?
The shapeshifter summarized.
More or less,
Cade confirmed with a nod.
Do you have a complex about it?
obviously.
Will you freak out if it's exposed to others?
No, but it makes me super uncomfortable, so I prefer keeping the mask on.
That's a bad habit. Looks can be just as much a weapon as any blade, and yours are like a crossbow that fires swords that explode into more swords.
Wow, that's fucking ugly.
Oh, you mean like psychological warfare?
She cupped her chin thoughtfully.
Come to think of it, I'm often told my smile can make people vomit. I just haven't thought of using that in combat.
That's not quite what I had in mind. Right now I want you to practice on reversing your thinking. From this point onward, what you're wearing now must become your true self, while this will be your mask.
Cade's concealing headgear was removed with a sudden hand movement, revealing that she was indeed a hideous freak, by her people's backward standards. In other words, she was unbelievably gorgeous by everyone else's. Her flawless white skin, bright red eyes, sharp feminine contours, and short black hair gave an exotic allure that could rival even Kira's weapons-grade cuteness. In fact, the Nosferatu's physical appearance had given Boxy a few ideas on how to subtly make its public persona even more attractive. The Nosferatu's physical appearance had given Boxy a few ideas on how to subtly make its public persona even more attractive.
Isn't this just you being an asshole?
Cade mumbled, clearly disturbed by this turn of events.
Please give me back my mask.
No. You need to get used to this for your own sake.
Boxy would have to thoroughly educate this ignorant girl that it was just this insignificant society that found her features repulsively ugly. She likely had no idea that was the case, as the Nosferatu city-states had closed their borders as part of an isolationist policy that only allowed a select number of people in or out. Though such a thing probably had its benefits, there were some very clear downsides, such as the average Nosferatu's general ignorance of the wider world. The vast majority hadn't seen an outsider, The vast majority hadn't even seen an outsider, nor did they wish to. This xenophobic attitude, though understandable, made them unsuited to serve as the gods' chosen. After all, heroes had to travel far and wide to come into contact with many different cultures and races as they carried out the duties bestowed upon them by their divine patrons. That was why Mortimer requested one of the Gravewalker kids. They had the requisite training... They had the requisite training and religious education, but were still impressionable youngsters that weren't completely set in their elders' close-minded ways. Cade's unfortunate face and attitude, as Zeke put them, were a big part of why Boxy had chosen her over the others, since they would help her blend in with the rest of the world. Many could teach Cade the finer points of being a silent killer, but exceedingly few could show her how to fit into a strange and alien society. Boxy T. Morningwood was arguably the only one who could do both. First things first, now that the shapeshifter had a grasp on her personality, it moved on to what she could actually do in a fight.
What's your job composition?
I'm a 41 rogue and a 25 ranger.
Uh-huh. And how old are you?
6.
I see.
This was yet another way that her people differed from the world at large. Their accelerated life cycle. A Nosferatu pregnancy would only last about 100 days. Once born, the infant developed rapidly, becoming physically, mentally, and legally an adult in 5 years compared to the 15 other enlightened races needed. However, this accelerated aging also meant they had significantly shorter lifespans, with the average Nosferatu dying of old age roughly 2 decades sooner than humans. Yet, these people still managed to dominate a continent, which was only made possible because the Nosferatu gained skill and job levels nearly twice as fast as normal people. This trait allowed them to achieve much in their relatively short lives. In theory, they had the potential to have 3 times as many rankers per capita as the rest of the continent's residents. The only problem was that achieving level 100 invariably required getting out of their city-state-sized comfort zone, so Nosferatu The only problem was that achieving level 100 invariably required getting out of their city-state-sized comfort zone, so Nosferatu VIPs were practically non-existent. Boxy was somewhat envious of this heightened learning capacity, but also thankful for it. It meant that Cade's training would take less time, which would allow the shapeshifter to finish its quest sooner and finally get that stupid cat job off its status. Let me check something. This turn of events.
Please give me back
your mask. Cade's concealing headgear was removed with a sudden hand movement, revealing that she was indeed a hideous freak, by her people's backward standards. In other words, she was unbelievably gorgeous by everyone else's. Her flawless white skin, bright red eyes, sharp feminine contours, and short black hair gave an exotic cat job off its status.
Mr. Sandman, was it?
What is it, Cade?
Where are we going, exactly?
You'll accompany me while I take care of some chores and test your abilities. After that, I'm taking you to an alchemist who can give you the job and show you the basics. Commit those lessons to heart, as you will be spending most of your downtime honing the craft.
I see.
Do you, actually?
No, sorry. Please explain the point of this.
The alchemist job synergizes well with rogue and ranger in terms of attributes. The extra dexterity and perception will help immensely. It also has a skill that will allow you to consume more alchemical substances without succumbing to potion sickness. It will be a valuable lifeline in your line of work, as is the ability to manufacture custom-made poisons. Once sufficiently developed, the alchemist job will also provide you with a reliable source of income. Ah, yes, that reminds me. You'll be responsible for any transactions or haggling while we're together. I need to know how well you handle your finances.
Finances? Really?
Of course. Mortimer is the god of death and commerce, so his hero needs to show equal competence with both murders and marketplaces.
So, you're not making me pay just because you're a cheapskate?
Definitely not. This is serious hero business.
Uh-huh. Sure it is. Unfortunately, I did not bring any money. Partly because you kind of kidnapped me, but mostly because I don't have any.
The Gravewalkers provided for her in many ways, but there was no salary or allowance involved.
That's fine. I'll loan you some gold to start with.
What? Why would I want gold?
Because that's what money is made out of?
Surely this girl wasn't that out of touch with the world.
No, it's not. I don't know what ass-backwards country you come from, but we trade with lead coins here.
And why is that?
Ah, because lead has value while gold is worthless?
Excuse you and your entire race?
What? Gold's ugly, soft, and heavy. I fail to see why anyone would be interested in that junk over the flexibility and ruggedness of lead.
Boxy's first thought was whether Mortimer would mind if the Nosferatu accidentally went extinct. It suppressed that knee-jerk reaction and gave the matter some consideration. The main reason it liked money was because coins. Boxy. The main reason it liked money was because coins shiny, but this was not so in this particular culture. The monster could get behind this idea, as it would feel much better about spending its wealth if it didn't glitter so enticingly. Furthermore, though the Nosferatu found gold worthless, the metal still had numerous magical and alchemical applications, so it was inevitable they'd have some of it lying around. Therefore, Boxy could theoretically acquire a whole bunch of shinies for dirt cheap if it bartered with goods instead of coin. That matter aside, it would appear it had to drill a lot more common sense into this weird girl than originally anticipated.
You have a lot to learn, and you will do well to pay attention. Your life depends on it.
Like, actually?
What do you think will happen should you fail this apprenticeship?
Better take notes then.
So she did, though perhaps not quite the sort of notes she should have been taking. Cade's observation log, Night 1.
This Sandman character is kind of weird. He's supposed to be a warlock, yet he's way too good at sneaking about, especially for a guy his size. I tried following him after we parted ways for the day, but he just disappeared somewhere around the corner. Makes me feel silly for training the ranger job. Tracking people was kind of the whole reason I was given it in the first place. Well, I guess that's to be expected considering Mortimer sent him, but I have a much bigger problem. Where am I supposed to sleep?
Night 2.
I got scolded tonight. Apparently breaking into a farmer's house, tying them up and locking them in the basement just so I could sleep in their bed was a no-no. Not sure why Sandy cares. He's killed hundreds of folks. I think. Pretty sure he's the same demon tamer me and the others were warned about a while back in the security briefing. Wonder if he'll let me meet his familiars?
Night 3.
Damn, those were some ugly familiars. The stalker I saw before looked kinda cute, but now that I had a good look at her, ew. I probably shouldn't talk since my face is terrible too, but that blue-haired one with the freakishly large breasts, that was a wake-up call. I guess what they say about the demons embodying the worst parts of mortals was true after all.
Night 5.
Found out that Sandy gets real mad if I try to steal his money. Also learned that healing potions, open wounds, and foreign objects stuck in said open wounds are not a pleasant combination. Was hoping I'd at least get a cool scar out of it, but no luck as per usual. Still, lesson learned. Don't ever touch Sandy's gold, even as a prank.
Night 8.
We raided a cave today. Not sure why, but we did. Actually, we isn't quite right. I was sent in alone to clear out the monsters. I think it was intended to be some kind of test, but he was seriously underestimating me if that was the case. Nosferatu can see in the dark, and I've been killing giant spiders for almost a year now. It's how our Spectre trainees get our levels most of the time. Problem is, I still don't see a reason why he had me do that. Nothing in there but a bunch of glowing crystals, and I'm fairly certain those don't have any practical use. They just sort of fall to pieces if you try to remove them from the walls, so that leads me to believe he has other plans for the cave. I'll just sleep here and wait until he comes back tomorrow to find out.
Night 9.
He blew it up.
Night 10.
Left the country tonight. Didn't even bother with checkpoints or security, just teleported across the border. The walls should have anti-teleportation countermeasures, so what gives? Then again, I've never heard of that transfer something spell, so whatever.
Night 11.
First time in a human village. The elders weren't kidding. These humans are repulsive. Not just the faces. I'm pretty used to seeing ugly every time I look in a mirror. They're just so filthy. How can they live with that much sweat on them? And the air has this prevalent stench of manure. Granted, I'm not much to talk since I don't get to wash my body as often as I'd like, but I'm on the road with a shady warlock. These humans have no excuse. It's shameful, really. Don't they know that cleanliness is next to godliness?
Night 6.
Okay, it's been a while since my last entry, mostly because I've been too tired to bother. Who knew haggling was so hard? I learned a lot, though, like the fact that getting my point across and stabbing someone in the face were not synonyms, or that murdering someone who ripped you off causes more problems than it solves. Oh, and people with authority are dicks. I mean, I already knew that. Thanks, Zeke, you cunt. But it's good to know the rest of the world is like that too.
Night 17.
A huge, six-legged cat thing I hadn't seen before crept up to the camp we made on the edge of the forest. Sandy said it was a janta, after he grabbed it by the neck and suplexed it into the ground for a one-hit KO. I didn't think I would ever see several 100 kilograms of monster flung about like an oversized sack of potatoes, yet here we are. He then continued fiddling with a weird bundle of metal plates and wires as if nothing had happened. Actually, he's been doing that for the past few nights now. Wonder what it's all about.
Night 18.
It was a bomb. Oh, also saw Sandy's face. It was incredibly handsome. Lucky bastard. I might have fallen for him if he wasn't such a slave driver.
Night 20.
I finally got praise tonight. I made my first superior quality necrotic poison with alchemy. Sandy seemed impressed, but I guess he didn't know Nosferatu had a knack for that sort of stuff because of our sensitive noses. Still, gotta admit it felt pretty good to be complimented on my work. It was pretty fun, too, doing things with my hands. Well, other than stabbing stuff or stuffing my face with food. Incidentally, I've gotten more used to the taste of janta meat than I would like. It's no Cade sausage, but at least there's a lot of it.
Night 22. Night 22.
Arrived at some island off the shore of the Oculus Sea. Was filled with vampires, ones that have been there for a long time. Seeing the undead version of my own people was not pleasant. Neither was the blight or the sunlight. Vampires hate it even more than living Nosferatu, so we managed to accomplish our objective of slipping in and out of the old fort there without being swarmed. We salvaged some type of relic, looked like a ring made of bone with a tiny laughing skull instead of a gemstone. It was cute, but I have no idea what sort of meaning it held beyond the obvious connection to Mortimer.
Night 23.
We continued clearing the island today, mopped up most of the small fry. That took us a while since they were spread out. Had a pair of beat-up stone golems roaming around too. Probably some type of old security system judging by how they ignored the residents. Sandy told me to take care of those myself, knowing full well that unenchanted daggers and poisons have no effect on them. Still one though. Managed to lead the brainless dolls to a cliff overlooking the sea and making them tumble down it. They probably survived the fall, but won't be able to make it back up the cliff without causing a rock slide. I'm more worried about tomorrow. We're going to tackle purifying the central fort. While I'm more than happy to release my ancestors, I assume, from their cursed existence, I'm worried whether we can manage. There were a lot of vampires in there, and I'd prefer not to get sucked dry like a Cade sausage. That'd be a bit too ironic.
Night 24.
Never mind. Sandy just blew it up. I think I'm starting to see a pattern here.
Night 27.
Joined a guild called Wet Bandits. No idea what's up with the name. Probably some idiotic inside joke. Wasn't thrilled about the idea, but Sandy made me do it since my rogue job reached level 50 with all the killing he had me do, and I needed a trainer to keep it going. He made me advance ranger too, even though I only use it for tracking, the fleet-footed and throwing arm skills. Got a bunch of weird looks when I asked to take off my mask, or put on my mask, as Sandy kept calling it. I knew that would happen. Didn't make it any less awkward. Anyway, my current job is to get used to the adventurer life on my own while my boss is off handling his private matters. Joke's on him though. Now that he's gone, I can finally slack off.
Night 28.
Or not. I couldn't settle down after spending nearly every night for the past month either fighting or on the road, so I did a quick monster elimination quest. Damned Sandy and his boot camp. Now I can't even relax unless I know I've done something productive. At least the inn I'm staying at offers a wooden tub and complimentary hot water for bathing, though I don't think they like me asking for it at sunset, midnight and sunrise. Well, I earned some money today, so hopefully I can use it to buy off their displeasure. Seriously though, paying people with gold feels weird as fuck. At least the really valuable coins are mithril. They're even called divine pieces. Those I can definitely get behind. Shame I don't have any.
Night 29.
I got super lucky. Was talking to this vegetable vendor when the cutest crow ever landed on my shoulder, like out of nowhere. He even let out a little caw-caw when I gave him some giant bat meat I had in my pocket. It was amazing. Never thought of one of Mortimer's messengers would ever get this close to me. This must be a sign that my hero apprenticeship is going well. Not sure why the cabbage man was so terrified though. Humans are weird.
Night 31.
Came back to the inn to find that ring from the vampire-infested island on the nightstand along with a note from Sandy. He told me to wear it at all times and that either he or Mortimer will contact me when the time is right. I don't mind since the ring looks neat, but I can't seem to take it off now. It's really stuck on there. I'm gonna be pretty pissed if it turns out I got slipped cursed equipment. I'm sure it'll work out though. I did see that crow recently.
Night 33.
Someone tried to rape me tonight. Cornered me in an alley while I was in casual clothes, demanded my body, and tried to force me down and everything. I was flattered, but he wasn't my type, so I gave him the slip. As in, I slipped the retractable knife hidden in my boot into his groin. I really should thank Sandy for making that for me. It really comes in handy. Or is that comes in footy? Is that even a thing people say? I wouldn't be surprised. Humans are weird. What did surprise me was that the boot knife didn't explode.
Night 34.
Finally got that ring appraised by an enchanter. Good news, it's not cursed. Bad news, they couldn't identify it. It's clearly a magic item, but I still have no idea what it does. Well, I guess I can live with it. I still think it's cute. I hope my skull looks that happy when I die. I need to think back to when Sandy took me from Zeke when the time comes. The look on his face will always make me laugh. Also, the enchanter made me some darkened glasses. Now I can finally stop squinting at the stupid sun during the day.
That's a lot of fucking journal entries.
Night 35.
Met a bunch of humans and dwarves while out on a quest. Well, not so much met, as in saved them from a roaming pack of ghouls. I really wish these pink-skins would tend to their dead better. You'd never see this many walking corpses back home. Or any, for that matter. Even if they appear, they're purified with extreme prejudice. Also, I think I'm starting to understand why Mortimer hates them. They're super fucking gross. They're worse than vampires in the decomposition department. Thankfully, I had a shower and a bottle on me, so I was able to get rid of the zombie juice smell right away. Man, those elves up north come up with some really handy stuff, don't they? I should pay them a visit once this hero apprenticeship thing is settled. Assuming I'm still alive, of course. For now, I managed to get a good deal on a 12-pack of showers. Should last me a week.
Night 38.
Apparently, I now have a reputation around town as the Soggy Princess. Humans continue to be weird.
Night 40.
I was banned from the library. Shouldn't have opened a shower in a bottle in there. Yes, the soapy water evaporates, but that doesn't unruin the ink. Whoopsie.
Night 41.
Snuck into the library to get a reference book on local herbs. Saw the librarian walking into the back room with the receptionist girl from the guild. Wonder what his wife will say about that.
Night 42.
I am no longer banned from the local library.
Night 45.
Okay, I've been giving some serious thought to what Sandy was talking about with that mask business. I'm used to being treated differently whenever my face was on display, but these people don't ridicule or avoid me like my countrymen. They give me things, like discounts or extra-large servings. At first I thought it was because they were taking pity on me since they were kind and simple folk, but after what happened earlier, I'm not so sure. That Alex guy straight up proposed to me in the street. He was quite serious too. Had an engagement ring and delivered a speech and everything. I shut him down, of course. His looks aside, he constantly reeks of booze, garlic, and grilled cheese. Just because my self-esteem isn't the best doesn't mean my standards are just as low, you know. Still, the way he was talking about ethereal beauty and whatnot got me thinking. Could it be these people don't actually find me ugly?
All right. And that is it, guys. I'm done for today. Back to it tomorrow. Thanks again for coming to hang out. I hope you guys had a good time. Remember to go subscribe to this channel, like this video, do whatever you need to in order to keep track of the next cold read tomorrow. I'm starting off about 10, somewhere between 10 and 10:30 again. That's AM Central. And yeah, if you haven't yet, go to soundbooththeater.com, check out Neven Iliev's The Stars Have Eyes. 15 full episodes, full cast, sound effects and music, all wonderful. I absolutely love that project, and I hope you guys will too. And don't forget also, we have the 5th short story from the Portal Side Quests short story anthology available now on at soundbooththeater.com. So lots of stuff to get from our website. Don't forget, on Halloween, we have an awesome sale happening. That's 15% off all in-app purchases on Halloween, and that's when we will have our new app by that time. So keep track of us. Go to soundbooththeater.com, sign up for our newsletter, keep track of all of our news, and hopefully I'll see you guys again tomorrow. Thanks again. Later.